All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today, we're gonna talk about 5 unconventional tips for fat loss. Now, we all know the regular tips that are out there. Restrict foods, cut calories, do all these things that aren't sustainable for the long term. So today, we're gonna talk about 5 unconventional tips that I use with my clients that help them from getting too hungry and be able to create sustainable results inside of their journey so that we're not creating the yo-yo effect to where we're doing really good, then we're doing really bad, and going through this continuous cycle that never really produces the result that we're looking for. So let's get into all 5. Number 1, your fat loss journey is gonna take longer than you think. That's a hard one to grasp because initially, whenever we think fat loss, we think of quick, fast, extreme, whatever is going to do the most amount of damage in the least amount of time possible to get us in and get us out. But that's usually what creates that yo-yo effect that never helps us get to a sustainable result. A sustainable amount of progress to make every single week is really 0.5 to 1% of weight loss per week. Now, for most people, that's going to be somewhere between a pound to 3 pounds per week. The heavier you are, the closer to that 3-pound mark. The lighter you are, the closer to that 1-pound mark. So thinking that you can blast 10 pounds in 2 weeks or blast 20 pounds in my 30-day challenge or all of these random things that are out there that are a short-term fix, it usually comes at the expense of an extreme that doesn't lead to a long-term result. So just accepting this from the start, it's going to take longer than you think. If you want it to take a month or 2 months, it's probably going to take 3, 4, 5, 6 months to create a sustainable result. That means that progress might be a little bit slower, but you're going to be able to sustain it for longer. So you've got to get out of that quick fix mentality and realize from the get, it's going to take longer than you think. Number 2, eat more voluminous foods. Now, typically that means eat healthier foods, but a lot of the times we get confused between voluminous foods and healthy foods. We think that peanut butter is healthy, we think that nuts are healthy, which they are, but at the end of the day, a lot of those things are very calorie dense for a minimum amount of volume, meaning you're not gonna be as full. When it comes to fat loss, we know we have to be inside of a calorie deficit. What foods you choose to make up that calorie deficit don't necessarily matter. You're gonna lose weight regardless as long as you're in that deficit. But to make the deficit easier, you wanna be eating more voluminous foods, meaning you're eating foods that are lower in calorie but have a higher amount of density to them to keep you feeling fuller for longer. So salads, things like watermelon, things like berries, things like broccoli, cauliflower, spinach, all of these things are going to be much more filling, which is going to lead to making the diet easier because you're not always going to be hungry. So don't get so caught up in eating and thinking, well, I'm eating healthy, so I should be losing fat. No, to make it sustainable, you need to be eating smart, meaning you're adding a lot of voluminous foods to help you stay fuller for a longer. At the end of the day, it comes down to calories in versus calories out. If you're eating less calories than what you're burning, you're going to lose weight over time. But to sustain that calorie deficit, you want to make sure you're eating foods that are going to keep you full so that you're not miserable and always starving and craving foods that can eventually lead to binges on the other side. So being smart about your food choices is super important to make the diet sustainable for the long term. Number 3, use caffeine to suppress your appetite. Now, you can obviously take this to the extreme to a point that is probably unhealthy, but using a little bit of caffeine to your advantage can be a game changer. What I like to do personally, what I have a lot of clients do, is in between lunch and dinner when you're working, there's usually this snacky period where you get a little bit bored at work, you're sick of working, and you go to grab some sort of snack that usually puts you over your calories. What I like to do and what I like to suggest is using caffeine in that time period. Around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're getting hungry, you're a little bit bored. Simply use a little bit of caffeine to suppress your appetite to push that last meal back later so you don't use up useless calories in the middle of the day just because you're bored at work or don't have much to do. So caffeine can be a game changer. It suppresses your appetite, it'll stimulate you a little bit, give you some energy to be able to get through the rest of your day and suppress some of those cravings that you might be having just because you're bored or sick of doing whatever you're doing. So definitely don't go too extreme with this, but at the same time, using it to your advantage a little bit can be smart. I like to do white monsters. You can do a pre-workout in the afternoon. You could even do coffee. Whatever it is, something a little bit sweet is even better because it'll take care of that sweet tooth that you're having to suppress your appetite even more, curb that craving, and then get you all the way till dinner so you can save more calories to be fuller when going to bed. Number 4, get rid of the all or nothing mentality. This is probably one of the most important ones. Everybody's always all in or all out. But if you accept from the get that you're gonna have mess ups along the way, you're going to be able to get so much further down the road. A lot of people will mess up and they'll use it as an excuse just to quit. But if you realize that mess ups are a part of the process to get you to where you're going, you can deal with the mess up, make the next correct choice, and continue down the path to get you to where you're trying to go. But if you use those little mess ups as roadblocks, you're never going to get there. A lot of people are all in or they're all out. You've got to get rid of that. You've got to accept before you even get started that there's going to be days you go over your calories. There's going to be days that you're unmotivated. There's going to be problems as you go through your journey. Accept that as you get started so that when they happen, you're not surprised by them and you can work through them instead of using them as excuses to quit and never actually get where you're trying to go. Number 5, you'll lose motivation. I don't think motivation is something you should rely on now. If it gets you started, that's great. But as you get going down the journey, things will get inconvenient at times. You've got to accept that as you get started. And that's where discipline comes in. But I think a lot of people have discipline wrong too. All that discipline is simply doing something when your mind is telling you to do nothing. Doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that you're going to kill it every single day, but you're always going to choose to give your best effort. Motivation will vanish. Motivation is an emotion. It comes and it goes. Understand that when you get started so that when it does dissipate and it leaves you, you're not in this all or nothing mentality that gets you to the point where you're like, well, screw this. I didn't create the results I wanted this week, so I'm gonna try again next year. When you learn to rely on discipline, you'll actually get to where you're trying to go. Again, discipline does not mean perfection. It just means you're willing to give some sort of effort when you want to give no effort. And if you can keep doing that and keep a little skin in the game, you'll eventually get where you're trying to go. But if you use the excuse of no motivation as your gateway to completely quit, you might as well not ever get started because motivation will leave. So those are my 5 points, 5 unconventional tips for fat loss. Hopefully these help you guys. If you have questions or more unconventional tips, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear about all of them. I hope that these help you. I think that they're a little bit different than what most people like to talk about. And these are all things that I use inside of my coaching service to really help my clients be able to reach their fat loss goals in a sustainable and long-term manner. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I'll talk with you soon.